This is my pitch for the Katikiro, right? Start a podcast. Very simple. Our culture is not dead. We've not yet been fully colonized. We can still capture it back. Yes, and the best way I think the kingdom can start is putting our cultures into story.
Are we living the last generation of Buganda?
Yes. We can make as much money as we need in farming. We can make as much money as we need in real estate. But if the core premise of moving our culture forward is ignored, then Buganda doesn't exist. But they should hire more data scientists. They should hire more in computing. There's a lot more to do that. There's a lot more, people can build video games that are Buganda-based. The countries that we've looked at as the pinnacle of where the direction of civilization should go right now are the countries that we are seeing that are attacking other countries, they're causing unnecessary wars. There's a genocide in Gaza, for example. Hi there, welcome back to the Uvotam Podcast. In our previous episode, we talked about knowing your audience. Today, we want to talk to you about turning your business into a story. Now that you know your audience, how are you going to structure your business into a story that your audience can consume? To start, I want to tell you about a movie we are currently working on at Uvotam. This is the typical heist movie. It starts with a policeman who has just graduated from trainee school and is going to join the forces. So this policeman is out at a restaurant eating lunch with his family, celebrating this graduation. This policeman, while they're eating, their youngest daughter, who's around 10 years old, goes to the bathroom. In this restaurant, there is a teller, mobile money teller agent, mobile money and agent banking teller agent. So while they eat, they're happy family, they talk, they chat, they talk about their dreams and so on and so forth. Armed robbers wearing masks come into the restaurant. So when they come in, they're holding guns, everyone panics. These armed robbers head for the teller. As they try to smash the teller glass thing to crack, some people start running out. When the robbers realize that it's extremely hard to crack, they force the guards, some of their fellow robbers who are guarding the doors, to stop people from coming out so they can have some hostages, which will help them persuade the people within the agent teller thing to open it. So luckily, the family was already out. So the policeman and the family were already out. But as soon as they go out, the policeman realizes that the daughter was still in the bathroom. So now in the movie, we see the daughter coming back from the bathroom into the restaurant just to see that this is a what? This is a robbery. And now the whole movie is based about how the policeman is able to come back into the restaurant, to break himself back into the restaurant, and how he's going to fight in order to save the daughter from this thuggery. In the end, obviously, since the policeman had just been trained in shooting guns, he's able to shoot the robbers dead. This is a very simplified version of this movie, but almost every movie you've watched is structured in the same way. Every well-told story can be broken down into 3 categories. 1, you introduce the character, the people who are going to be the main actors in the movie, and the problem that they're going to try and solve. That is called the first act, which is the introduction. You introduce the people who are going to be affected and the thing that's going to affect them. The second act of the movie is letting the characters know that they actually have a problem. So the second act of the movie is when the policeman who had safely exited the restaurant realizes that this robbery is not just a general problem, it's actually his problem because the daughter has been captured within within this robbery. And within the second act is where we show the growth, where we make the tension deeper. So within the second act is where the policeman has to break into the restaurant again. He has to figure out how to get a gun and to shoot, to use some of his skills to shoot. And in the third act is where you resolve the story. This is where the policeman has started, maybe he has successfully killed the robbers. And, to make this a good movie, usually the person who has resolved the problem also gets changed by the problem. So maybe the policeman also gets shot in his shooting arm. And so he can't shoot anymore. He has managed to save the daughter, but now he's not able to shoot anymore. And what the idea of the structure of this story is that, first of all, it's very easy to follow and complete, but also it's easy to follow up on. So if each solution within your story exposes people to a new problem, it gives you an opportunity to create a new solution going forward. And this is not just the structure of movies, this is a structure of businesses. When you set out to do a business, your goal is to identify a problem. That is the first act. And then the second act is usually you executing on that problem, making sure that problem doesn't exist in the world. And then the final act is usually how you get to a place where you've solved that problem. But during this process, that problem is going to change you as well. It's going to change your business as well. As you learn, for example, here at Uvotam, as we learn how to take pictures, we have to know who to hire, we have to know what equipment to buy, we have to know how to market, and so on and so forth. This is the structure of business. And hopefully, when we get another problem after you solve this first one, we are in a better position to solve that too. I think the best way maybe think of your business as a series where each episode brings its own problem and the next episode gets the actor in a new frame set to solve the next problem. So yes, with me today is Kathy again. Kathy, welcome back to the Uvotam Podcast.
Thank you so much. Yes, yeah, I like how you've introduced this, and we're using the concept of a series or like a movie, to tell a story for a business, turning Uvotam into a story. Today we're looking at Uvotam specifically. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to go with the first question that I have. Putting aside Uvotam, in this era of 2025 of today, what is that one business that is best fit to turn into a story and it makes it in this in this generation of today?
Yes. And I think I understand your question clearly. If you think, if you actually look out of the scope of like typical businesses, right? If you think of institutions, organizations, governments, NGOs, and so on and so forth, when we talk about businesses, entrepreneurship here, those are also covered with an umbrella, right? Anyone who is set out to solve a problem, in some of our previous episodes, that's how we define the entrepreneur. You have the arrogance to go out and solve a problem. Yes, and now you built this institution that is out to solve a problem. Yeah. Maybe a typical example that I can give, something that's not very typical, right, is think of the Buganda kingdom, right? Yes. So today, when I was growing up, when I was going to university, I used to drive. My father used to drive me every day to university in the morning, and would listen to Bidugu. Rest in peace, Katolu Wama. Would listen to that program. There was a morning program on CBS every day where Katolu Wama and the fellow presenters, would make jokes and comment about society and so on and so forth. Right? Yes, and this is the CBS is the Buganda radio, right? And my father's loyalty to the radio made him feel more of a Muganda, right? So I'm a Muganda, I'm listening to the Kabaka's radio, I trust the Kabaka's radio, the Kabaka has, or the Buganda's, the Kingdom's radio has the Buganda's interests at heart, right? And there's also programming that's directly targeting Buganda. The language is Luganda most of the time. I'm actually not sure if CBS has like English or other language programs. Yes, but so this is what the kingdom did very well, right? But look at today, for example. Yeah, a typical Ugandan, a typical Muganda. Let me say typical Muganda, right? Your parents live Masaka. They come and build on a 50 by 100 in Wachiso or in Kampala. They send you to school, and if you're talented academically, maybe you go say to Wudo, you go to one of those government secondary schools. Then you join MOOC. Makerere, big percentage of students there are Baganda by tribe. If you're comparing each tribe individually, right? Yeah. So then after you get into a corporate business, you go and work for MTN, you go and work for Stanbic Bank, and so on and so forth, right? At this time, chances are very low that you're listening to CBS.
That is so true.
Yes. Chances are very low. Even for Terefina, they have a TV station as well. The Kingdom has a TV station, right? Chances are low that you're listening to Terefina as well, right? So the only time you get to interact with the Kingdom is maybe when the Prime Minister, when Katikiro posts on Twitter, usually, they could maybe giving a summary about some event that happened and so on and so forth, right? Yeah. But what CBS has become is the thing of our fathers, right?
Or you get to listen to it when you visit your fathers or
when you
older
visit
people,
exactly,
and they've tuned in, and then
yes.
like you're picking up with the current affairs.
What the kingdom doesn't know is now they are branding the tribe as a thing of the old. Yeah, right? Yes. So they're branding the kingdom as a thing of those days. Yes, because they haven't yet known that the only way, especially if a kingdom like Buganda, the kingdom of Buganda is in the business of moving the culture forward, right? If you're looking at it from an entrepreneurial perspective, their only business, their only problem to solve in this universe is to move the Buganda culture into the next generation, right? To make sure that I know what it means to be a Muganda man. My son knows what it means to be a Muganda, and his son after him, right, knows how to be what it means to be a Muganda. But unfortunately,
it's staying with a generation. It's not extended to like Gen Z. Don't know if Gen Alphas will pick up on it.
Gen Alphas, they don't know radio. They literally don't know radio, because I think when I first bought my first smartphone, it had a radio app. Today they don't. Like literally people who listen.
And I think also the features are very limiting to even excite you to put on the radio, because you have to have those wired earphones for it to work. So clearly,
radio is not the medium for the young people today. Yes, but the young people today have never stopped being a Muganda. So what's going to happen is people who are going to become curious about what it means to be a Muganda. So some of them are going to give up entirely. They're going to try and become hip-hop kids. They're going to become like Americans. They're going to dress like Americans. They'll only be Baganda maybe when they've been invited to functions where they come and wear sneakers on Kwanjula and play 50 Cent, and bounce to 50 Cent on Kwanjula and things like that. And then the kingdom may become even reactionary, where the kingdom is now complaining that, hey, abana bagwamu mpisa. But abana tebamanyi mpisa. It's not that bagwamu, they never had mpisa in the first place, because they don't know where to learn mpisa from, right? And while obviously it's true that the structure of Buganda is that the family raises the child, right? So it's not like a state where you're expected to learn state laws and so on and so forth. In Buganda, your parents, it's their onus to raise you, yes, but the family restricts their tutelage to what is important for you as a child in the family, right? If you want to learn her culture, if you want to learn why we dance the way we dance, if you want to learn about Buganda spiritualism, for example, if you want to learn about all those things, unless your father is one of those things, unless your father is an expert drum maker, unless your father is a spiritual...
practicing spiritual person, you'll know about the gods.
Exactly. You probably will never know about those things that are out of the scope. But the onus of the kingdom now, that's why the kingdom has structures, that's why we have Mengo, the official sort of like headquarters for the kingdom. That's the reason that those things are there. I don't even know the word to call Mengo, by the way, because again...
Mengo is the capital of Buganda.
So I don't like that, again, because I'm disconnected from the kingdom, because the kingdom is not investing in reaching out to Baganda like me, people who have stepped out of ruralness, the urban Muganda. How does the kingdom, for example, in Buganda look out to that, right? So this is Buganda would be the perfect example of turning their business, right? And again, I'm using the word business here loosely. I know Buganda is not like a money-making business, but investing in turning Buganda, the culture institution, into a story. Yes. And again, the biggest pitch we made at the beginning of this podcast is, what is the role of podcasting in turning your business into a story, right? So today, for example, Buganda can start making podcasts in English. This sounds absurd. This sounds absurd, but unfortunately, if you watch our previous episode, you have to find your audience where they are. Don't assume that, yes. And today, even Baganda, who have been, the most urban Baganda, who have been educated, who have lived in Kampala almost their entire lives, are more comfortable speaking English.
True.
Than there in Uganda. Not even speaking. Some of them, okay, like for me, for example, I'll give an example. If I'm talking to my parents, if ever, I never use English. If I talk with my friends, I mix English and the Chigowa Luganda. The Chigowa English and the Chigowa Luganda. It's not really English, it's not really Luganda. It's a mixture of, but when I'm consuming content, I'm more comfortable, more trusting of content in English. Again, this could be, again, I want to fault the kingdom as well. When I was in primary school, I was beaten for speaking Luganda. So, I've been indoctrinated into thinking
these are conversations we need to have now.
It's a local thing, right?
Yeah.
And the way, because again, I'm not saying Buganda should compete with all schools. I have to say that I went to Buganda schools, first of all. So that is also one thing. I went to Budo. So, they beat me in a school in Buganda for speaking Luganda. So that's just a weird thing in its own. But the thing is, right now, it's not all gone. Our culture is not dead. We've not yet been fully colonized. We can still capture it back. Yes. And the best way I think the kingdom can start is putting our cultures into story, right? Have a podcast. This is my pitch for the Katikiro. Yes. Gunde Savasajja. This is my pitch for the Katikiro, right? Start a podcast. Very simple. Start a podcast, have experts in Buganda ways. People come and explain to us why we dress the way we dress, right? Why do we dress like Arabs, for example? When do we have to wear back cloth? What is the ritual? We have some rituals, say, for death. We have the ritual for installing the heir. We have rituals for Kwanjula.
Yes.
What are these rituals?
What's behind them?
Yes. And why is Buganda so open to other cultures? Why is Buganda being so free? Because when we read the history, it is the Kabaka of Buganda who invited the white people. What is it about the Baganda that makes us so open compared, to other cultures that are more rigid and more strict about how they want to move into the future? But also they tell us, should we hope for Buganda to exist 100 years from now? Or, are we living the last generation of Buganda?
Yeah.
Yes. So I think that's a very easy pitch for a company, for a business.
And I'm sold for it. So I think it's a good idea.
If Buganda thought, because the money is there. You see the Mengo owns a lot of the, so right now I think the biggest investment is in farming, validly so, in Mwanyitedi Imba. But also there is an opportunity they've invested a lot in real estate. Yeah, so there are a lot of fancy apartment things that are owned by Buganda, which I think is also good. People have to eat and rather people have to sleep and so on and so forth. But I think they're forgetting the core problem that the institution is set out to solve. Yes, they're forgetting the core premise of their story, right? The story I told initially was about the policeman saving the kid. Whatever happens in that movie, the core premise is the policeman has to save the kid, right? If the policeman doesn't end up saving the kid, people will leave the movie feeling cheated, right? If in the end, yes. If the policeman actually dies after saving the kid, people will be okay. People can cry, but they will be fine. But if the kid dies and the policeman doesn't save him, people feel like, why did we come to watch this thing? Exactly, yes. So that is the premise. And this is the same thing with Buganda is we can make as much money as we need in farming. We can make as much money as we need in real estate. But if the core premise of moving our culture forward is ignored, if that is ignored, then Buganda doesn't exist. It will just be a bunch of businessmen making money in real estate and making money in what? In farming. But this is just one way. Buganda is one institution, Another could be, again, we keep talking about telcos, we keep talking about banks, we keep talking about startups, a typical Ugandan, whichever way, don't forget your problem. That is the first thing. And then how do you go about structuring your problem into first act, second act, and third act, And that is what I'm saying is, first of all, start a podcast. This is what I would say to the Baganda, right? To the kingdom. Start a podcast. Hopefully hire Uvotam, obviously. Yes. Start a podcast. Let it be an English podcast. Or you can start too, English and Luganda. Let it be English Luganda, where you mix the languages, right? Reach out to the audience that is starting to feel like being a Muganda is a thing of the old. It's a rigid identity that they don't need to carry with them anymore. Tell them why the culture survived the longest, because Uganda is the longest kingdom on the continent, by the way. Yes. And why our culture has survived the way it has. What makes us unique? Why are we not structured? We think of Buganda by that as a kingdom, but the kingdom thing is a white people thing, right? Buganda is a brotherhood. So you become a Muganda by just living on the land, basically. Yes. You choose a Muganda name, you become a Muganda. Initially there were, I think, like 5 clans, but people have started making their own clans. Because again, Buganda is an open community. Anyone can become a Muganda. Obviously, if you're born of a Muganda, by default you become a Muganda, but there are other ways to become a Muganda, and things like that.
Become Msajja wa Kabaka.
Yes, educate us about how people become Baganda, for example. Educate us about the gods of Baganda, because again, also the word God
That's true.
is a very Western thing.
And I think it's a perfect timing now, because there's like a shift in identity where our generation is picking up on, but those guys colonized us and they sold us their Jesus and Muhammad. But what happened to our gods? Were our gods like the Satan? So right now we're in a space we're having this kind of conversation. So yeah, I think Buganda should really listen to this.
Yes. Like if you look at the news right now, this is a bit of a tangent, but if you look at the news right now, the countries that we've looked at, as the pinnacle of where, the direction of civilization should go right now are the countries that we are seeing that are attacking other countries. They're causing unnecessary wars. There's a genocide in Gaza, for example. These are unnecessary things. When I was going to school, everyone told me China evil, America good, right? Yeah, democracy good, America, because democracy, dictatorship bad. But now we see China is not in any wars, right? My whole life, China has never been in a war. But consistently, it seems like, and I don't want to choose China over America. I want to choose me. But if I don't know who I am, then whatever I'm going to define myself as going to be a mix of China and America, right? And this is where the kingdom comes in, Come to Uvotam, or tell us how to reach you. Will come, obviously. Let us start a podcast and let us start telling the Baganda. I know there are things like Kisakate and so on and so forth that are targeting more younger kids, but I think there is also a constituency of Baganda among us, the adults, who would be willing to spend an hour, immersed in our own culture,
in our own identity. So when I'm a Muganda, I actually know what it means. It's just beyond the name, and it's actually understand what it is.
So I think that's the core of it. Is if you set out a business to sort of bring new chicken, to invent the way people enjoy chicken, and then you're doing so well at doing chicken, and then over time, your business is about how well the chicken is packaged. You're forgetting your problem. Your problem is to give people good chicken, not well-packaged chicken. And as long as you start there, as long as you start from, this is a problem that I want to solve, the other part is, how now do I structure my story in a way that's captivating? How do I put my story in the 3 acts? The first thing, obviously, is plan it out. What would be the ideal way to target? I think podcasting is a great channel, but obviously the other channels like TikTok, the other channels like even TV. Buganda has a TV. They have a radio station. How do we make this attractive to like the urban people? Yeah, I know you can now stream radio stations, but yeah, still I don't think it's as good as.
I think they need to follow the understand how the trends now exist. If it's like YouTube Live, go there. If it's TikTok, have a Buganda TikTok thing so that people can.
Yeah. I mean, the kingdom should hire more up-to-date skills. So I know the kingdom has a lot of lawyers, right, and maybe a lot of like people from the arts academic, right? But they should hire more data scientists. They should hire more in computing. There's a lot more to do there. There's a lot more, people can build video games that are Buganda based. Yes, all that is there, and they hold the monopoly on the culture. Being a Muganda means you subscribe to the Buganda kingdom.
Or creatives, because I'd love to see a Chintu and Nambi, probably in an animated version for our own children, so that it's just not stories that we have, but they've been probably put onto some level of creativity where you can be like, oh, this is how Chintu was, and maybe you also understand the story behind it, because again, it could be Chintu and Nambi, but it could be having a meaning that we probably don't even understand. To get to that depth,
the multiple interpretations that people can have about yes, exactly. So yeah, that's true. I know there's I forget what the name of the movie is, but there's a movie that was recently released for the UFF, for Uganda Film Festival, that has been running. And a big part of it, again, is Buganda based. I think the Katikiro was invited to the premiere as well. I'll just put the name on the screen. But I think also, if Buganda has a budget for filmmaking, they should open up about that. They should have a process that's very transparent, that if you're Muganda and you have a story you want to tell, we have this sort of budget for you to tell it as what? As part of the Buganda Foundation. Things like that. I think those are important ways, especially for the culture, because nothing else matters for the culture apart from the stories, right? Yes, the people, everyone is going to live and die, but if your stories die, that is the end of your culture.
To relate to that story.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. No, that's, I think for your first question, I think that would be the most typical.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. For Buganda, I cannot wait for a movie of Jaja Mukasa. So what Jaja Mukasa does. I have that name. It runs through family, but I don't know what Jaja Mukasa does, but yeah, to be good. So for the second question, as Uvotam, as I head in Uvotam with your position, what are the solid steps Uvotam has taken, to turn themselves into an action story?
Nice. Okay, so the first thing is we've dug deep to identify what actual problem we're trying to solve, right? And we've concluded that because we believe strongly that only humans tell stories, the one problem that we think we can solve for Uganda is to sanitize the stories in Uganda, right? So we want to look at some of the stories that make people more paranoid and turn them into stories that inspire people. Want to get overly dramatic stories that make people say hate their parents and so on and so forth, and turn them into stories that actually bridge relationships between families and things like that. Yeah. So that is what the goal we've decided to do, right? So if we start there, how do we turn that into a story? How do we make sure that when people know Uvotam, they know that this is what we've set out to do? A big first step has been this podcast, right? So we've done this podcast, which is also an ad where we want to tell people this is what Uvotam has set out to do, right? This is what we are trying to do. This is the structure in which we are trying to do it. So we have the problem, and now we have a way, we have a skill set. Again, it's a bit unfair with Uvotam because we are in the business of telling stories. So, we actually are doing movies as well. We are doing content for TikTok. We are also engaging other businesses that we work with to do campaigns where we bring the whole of Uvotam on board, where we come as Uvotam. We don't just submit a pitch where, when you hire Uvotam, you come and work with us into structuring your campaign, and things like that. So a big part of this is the problem that we have right now, which is how do we sanitize stories. This is the execution. This is, we are hiring the right people. We are also learning how people are consuming stories. I think in our first episode, today we are broadcasting this after Mamdan has been elected, but in our first episode, we predicted that Mamdan would win. But I think a big part of his campaign was, based on how much he knows how people consume stories. It was a TikTok campaign. It was a social media campaign. His videos were viral. People were sharing videos because they were funny, right? And that is also part of what we've learned is if we want people to actually watch good stories, our goal is going to be to put those stories where people are, yes, make them relatable, also put them in those channels. If people go on TikTok, we are not going to say, oh, TikTok is for idiots. Yes, if there's a lot of bad content on TikTok, we want to reduce that bad content by adding some good content, right?
That's true.
That is
That's
our
a goal.
approach, basically, yes.
Yeah.
We want to do more podcasts, so we have a very good deal for people who want to start podcasts. So, you can always contact us and we'll get back to you. You can send an email to hello@uvotamstudio.com. And if you want to start your podcast, we have good offers, but also we know that some people may think, oh, there's too much talking in podcasts. I have my own style of doing podcasts that I think will improve the podcast ecosystem. We want to make sure you're also there. Yeah, you understand. So that's the thing is we now have the problem. We have our version of execution, which is, again, putting out more stories. And our solution is going to be, if at some point, we've made good movies and people are now debating on quality of stories. When we have good people, because we are going to start two podcasts here at Uvotam. One is going to be about spirituality, the scope of spirituality that's out of, the Western stuff or the Eastern stuff, but spirituality based on the human person themselves. That is one thing. But also we are going to start a podcast on story analysis, where we're going to be reviewing movies, we're going to be reviewing books, and so on and so forth. And the point, again, of those podcasts is we want to get that conversation there, where now people are watching other people's movies, and we call the director here and we tell him, hey, that bullet there was not convincing. And we want to get that feedback, right? We want to make sure that the filmmakers or the storytellers know that now there's a critic also watching your films, and the critic's role is not to obviously diss your storytelling or your art, but the critic's role is to make sure that you understand that there's a sort of like there's a good way to tell stories and there's a bad way to tell stories. And yeah, a big part of what we are going to be doing, that is when we get to a place where there are now more podcasts, not about, most premier podcasts about, hey, I did this is what we're wearing when we're shooting, the director was very angry. That's what most podcasting about movies is about. But if we reach a place where now people actually debating the structure of the story, that, okay, this is not well executed. What if you had moved this here? Wasn't this movie too long? Wasn't it too short? This character doesn't have depth. If we reach to that place where now people are analyzing even the interpretations that, hey, okay, this big part of it, are you referring to the Buganda gods, or this part of it, are you referring to the Western gods? Things like that. If we reach to that place, then I think it will be our initial first solution. And then maybe we'll figure out what our next problem should be.
At that point, yes, we would have figured out what our next problem.
So right now, this is our path. Tell more stories. We have categorized our stories into, people knowing about us giving our feedback, sort of setting a direction for what the industry and storytelling to go, and then sort of measuring and knowing that, okay, at this point when we've reached here, when we have podcasts that are also criticizing our work, that is when we know, okay, now we've made it. We've put the stories at a path where they can sanitize themselves, where people who know how to tell good stories can watch the bad story and review it and recommend which stories people should watch to other people because of the quality of the story, not because of people are popular and stuff like that.
Okay. That's a good journey. That's well thought through. So yeah, I know we'll make it there. We'll make it there.
Really?
Yeah. So for a business, a traditional business, like the normal business, like a restaurant, what's the best channel for them to tell their story if you're running a restaurant? Because there's so many people running restaurants.
Yes. So I think we've done a lot of work for the restaurants that fall within the Hagumara umbrella. Yes. So I think there's the Patio, there's the Villa. We've done a good amount of work with those guys. So for the restaurant case, most of our approach has been, so most of these guys have a trendy thing. So they see, Instagram now pushes these reels. They call us, come and do for us a reel. So that's what we do, right? But our approach, we want to change it a little bit. Again, because we don't own these businesses, it takes a little bit of negotiation to get them to see the things the way we see them. But our approach has been to change this a little bit in a way that we come and pitch you a full concept. Yeah. And we think that, again, podcasting is a good approach. But, with restaurants, maybe just sitting down and talk about food may not be the best thing. But it could be the wineries, or a lot of those wineries and liquor shops that pop up. It could be maybe Johnny Walker sponsors a drink and talk, men's chivozi. It's a simple podcast where maybe 2 or 3 men drinking Johnny Walker come and have like a very philosophical conversation about drinking and, about the nature of alcohol, about when is the right time to drink, what is the right amount, what to do when you drink, how it has helped, things like that. A real man conversation in a man setting. You're sitting in a cellar drinking very expensive liquor, the set is beautifully lit, and the target is men who are looking for the target would be drinking men who want to again step up their drinking game. This is by the very big culture, especially around cigar smokers. So cigar smoking is, yes, you go in a cigar lounge, they get the box out for you. It's a whole ritual. The thing is so fancy, right? And, liquor as well, there's the expensive liquors that you can do the same thing for, right? But also a typical restaurant could be, my restaurant is good. I remember when I used to stay in Chiwatule, I used to go to buy my food. It was local food from Enalongo at that Chiwatule stage. And I would walk sometimes, even when I used to stay in Chigowa, I would walk all the way from Chigowa and go and get our food because I really enjoyed it. And the difference now, okay, the thing that I would have done for her if at that point, I wanted to promote her restaurant would be for her to tell me her process of cooking, yes, but not just, this is a recipe. I think the recipe would be good, but also like her journey, mama yanjigiriza okufumba because I was a woman and I needed to learn how to cook, things like that. Now it's a business, this I started the business and so on and so forth. I think that for restaurants especially, everyone eats food, yes, people want to know those nuanced journeys about cooking, because we're also doing, by the way, a documentary on Kampala food. So we're also going to do that. We actually have shot a good amount of that, but when it comes to food, you can't run out of ideas, because a lot of, maybe apart from Buganda, who are not supposed to talk when they're eating, but a lot of social moments everywhere else happens around food. The way people have a whole dinner culture where, maybe from office, if you're going to celebrate something, you do that over dinner, where you go and sit and interact with the whole company, eat while you talk, and so on and so forth. That is what food does in most cultures, think of Christmas is when you expect all your relatives you've never talked to come and give you too much utensils to wash. But that is also like the whole point. The culture is around food. So if you're starting a restaurant, that is a good thing also to target, to know, maybe let me make my podcast about festivities. Let me talk about what to eat on Eid, what you should probably plan to cook on Easter, and so on and so forth. Tell us about these things, so that we also spice up our events, our festivities, and so on and so forth. And in return, we get to see your business. We get to keep your business and our awareness.
So it's like showcasing your intimate relationship with your food and how you go about your whole. Could be management, could be food, could be execution, could be everything, could be either inspiration to get there.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, and the thing again is to remember is your core problem. Don't be like the Buganda kingdom. Don't forget that your core problem is maybe to do this. If your core problem is to feed people, then maybe talk more about how your food is affordable, right? If your core problem is because you have the best recipe, your grandmother passed on to you the recipe that no one has, then tell us why your chicken is supposed to be fancy. Yeah, I remember when I was in Europe, I went to Amsterdam once, and we went to one of my friends was having a birthday. So we went to I think 7-course meal. It was a long, long meal. So this chef, they come to serve you, white people are real thugs. They give you like a tiny piece of food on a very huge plate like this. And then wine, right? And then the guy comes and tells you the story of what you're eating, right? So you sit down and tells you, okay, so this is la vouge mojoie, and it's from the things like that, yeah? And a big part of the experience is to learn about the culture, to learn about even the wines. So they would open the wine, they make you sniff it, and then it tells you, okay, so this is the Voluchotois. This is the vineyard from where? And like stuff like that, yeah? And that is the experience. The experience not just to put calories in your tummy, but also immerse yourself into the culture, right? And we can do that here, because I've gone to fine dining places here as well, where it's just a typical restaurant. You sit, they give you food, and you go. Then maybe the manager can come and ask, is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah. But fine dining is not that. Fine dining comes with a storytelling as well, yes. And so, again, a lot of this could be a connoisseur, those wine people, I forget what they call them, could be starting your podcast to tell people about wines, about South African wines, about when you should drink white wine and when you should drink black wine, about the cultures behind wines, basically. All that is content you can make. If that is a problem you set out to solve, it's how you can turn your business into a story without going directly into ads. You understand? So there's, it like for restaurant, for example, and we've talked about restaurants only, but for restaurants, the sky is the limit. Why did you start your restaurant? The answer to that question is the entire podcast. If you want to start converting your story, your business into a story, the answer to the question is, why did I start it? It may not be related to food. It could be, I started it as a hustle because I had another way of getting money. You understand? Yeah. That could be it. I started my restaurant because I had another way of getting money. And now you're teaching us about hustling, right? Yes. The numbers, yes. How do you make the food efficient? Things like that. It could be totally about that. Yeah. The other industry, by the way, to look at, and the industry we want to partner with significantly, would be pharmacy and hospitals. Yeah. Because again, I feel like the relationship we have with pharmacies and hospitals is not very good. Yeah. For example, for me, I've never finished a dose. I don't think ever in my life I've ever been given a dose and I finished it. As soon as I feel the fever has gone for a whole day, yeah. But I've also read, and again, this is the weirdest thing because I've read about why it's important, especially for antibiotics, why it's important to finish the dose, right? But if you start a podcast with that goal in mind, educating people about medication they're taking, because for me, the thing is, I don't trust the medication. Yes, it doesn't make me feel good, and anything that doesn't make me feel good, I'm like, okay, I'm only taking you because of this symptom, but otherwise, no, we are not friends, right? You understand? So, but if someone started a podcast explaining to us why, say, some medicine makes you feel drowsy, why some medicine makes you feel sleepy, why you shouldn't take maybe some of the cold cup during day when you have to work, why you shouldn't mix maybe medicine with alcohol and things like that. That could be an entire podcast, right? And in the back of that, you tell us, hey, this is brought to you by this pharmacy, right? No, this is brought to you by this pharmacy. We know because you're setting the podcast set up in your pharmacy. You're using examples of the actual brands you're distributing and so on and so forth. That is, you've set out to solve a problem and now you're turning it into a story. And in the end, you're building a self-sustaining an ad. Yeah, I know on TikTok, there's this famous doctor. Again, I forget his name. I'm not maybe very good at names. I'll also put the name down there. But he's perhaps one of the best TikTokers in Uganda. But he's also selling other products, right? So he's wearing his doctor thing and usually uses that gimmick of making the lips so big and so on and so forth. But he's selling other products. But what if he actually turned his own? Anyway, his thing is successful, so maybe he doesn't need advice from me. But no, there's also an opportunity for him turning his own practice into the actual story, right? And maybe that's actually what he's doing because he seems very passionate and people are resonating with his content. That is also a path. If you know how to be funny, maybe start a dancing podcast for your gym to convince people why, doing gym every day at 2 a.m. is the best option, things like that. And, that's for me, that's how I see it. The way you start is ask yourself the question is, why really am I doing this as a business? And that answer, the way you answer that is through telling that story, because it's not usually one answer, but it's through expressing yourself in a story, starting a podcast, most likely, or, using those other channels that stories are distributed at, yes. And that's the thing is also, if you're not sure, if some of this message resonates with you, but you're not very sure where to start, this is definitely something you should work on, but you don't know, maybe a marketing manager at a big pharma, a big hospital, and you don't know whether, this is the right, you don't know where to start. You can just send us that email, at hello@uvotamstudio.com. We shall come. We shall walk you through the business. We shall try to answer that question with you. And then we can even start planning a podcast with you. Most of that interaction is going to be free until we start executing the podcast with you is when we're going to charge you. So for you, at least there's no downside. Just reach out and we can always work with you to turn your business into a podcast, into a story, not just a podcast, into a story, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much. That's been a very good interaction. I'm going to go back to that experience in the restaurant. So when they were telling you about the venajou and the bonajou, you stopped thinking about the small food on the plate? The whole experience?
So this is the two tricks, okay, for me, I learned about this fine dining thing in Europe. The first thing is they want to get you drunk so you don't complain about the food. Every course comes with wine. So every time you drink, you're getting drunker. And the other thing is, again, these stories, obviously, they're interesting. If you're doing it I did it for one time in my life, right? I think it was 400 euro. The meal was so expensive. Yeah, I did it. I'll never probably do it again unless someone else is paying, right? But again, the thing is, it's a good experience that I have. We're talking about it right now, right? It's an experience besides the food because the food has already gone through my digestive system. But besides the food, I have that experience. This guy was talking about like wine. Okay, they use a lot of like European languages I don't understand. So a lot of it, I don't memorize it. So when they explain, for example, like wines, they can't explain them in English. First of all, it wasn't even England. It was Amsterdam, right? Yeah, they were speaking in English because we're all like English speakers there. But the cultures, the wines are from, say, France, they're from Italy, they're from what, and the whoever is describing this to you wants to represent that culture as accurately as possible. Yeah. So they want to tell you this is the Vignavura, and then it tells you, remember the other cartel, blah, 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 blah. They're the ones who started it, and that is, yes. Things like that. And by the time you're done eating, first of all, now a lot more about how violent white people are, but it's a whole experience, not just food. Yeah, and these are small things that businesses here can start. If you know that storytelling is the way, here they say that a way to the Muganda man is through food. To the Muganda man is heart. That is not true. Whoever said that, like, the only way to anyone's heart is through a well-told story. A well-told story. That is the only way to someone's heart. And if you craft all your experiences around that actual methodology, that the way I reach out to people, really, really reach out to people, is by telling them really, really good stories, then your business is said to be successful.
Okay. That's interesting. I think the best business people I can talk about right now are con artists or any type of cons, because I feel like they'll use that same approach. And until they have you where they want you to be. But by the time you realize, but you won't forget how they told you that story.
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
The ending is not really nice, but
Yes,
yeah.
yes, that's true.
Like
So this is actually a good point. If you think of two major versions of stories that have been told about spirituality, right? The Jesus story and the African spirituality stuff, right? So right now, we don't know a lot about how Africans practice spirituality before. Yeah, I mean, they obviously had spirituality. In fact, I think they had a better version of spirituality because all these things of depression and whatnot are very, very foreign. Yeah. But we've been told about this from the conqueror's viewpoint, right? At least people in my generation, we only know, for example, okay, let's talk about our own family, right? Our grandfather, Matov, who's this company is actually named after, decided to become a Catholic because he was tired. In his family, he banned anything, even if you make a room about witchcraft. That is it, you pack and leave his home, right? And so his son, our father, after that, now for us, we are not even introduced to that witchcraft stuff. So yeah. And now, even for me, I'm not letting my kid play around with witchcraft. You understand, right? But what if the Buganda, the kingdom, came out to tell us what the fuss is, because I'm not trying to imagine that, my grandfather's father went to hell because I'm sure for him he didn't know about Christ, right? Yes. So that's also the thing is, what is the actual story about these practices? What is the actual story about Abasesi? What does that even mean? Because right now it's just a character in a horror movie. When you think of Abasesi, what are those things about? How does our spirituality entangle with our mental illness? Because you hear those things, white people call that mental illness. They've tried to figure out a scientific way of diagnosing and healing most of that stuff. But what is that really? How do the Baganda interpret that? Those are the things that I know we are not like a writing culture. Yeah, so we don't have a lot of our history written. But still, those stories have passed down the head of the Bakulubo Busolia, who know the stories of their of their clans. You understand?
Passed on that information.
Yes.
Verbally, so sometimes maybe it gets lost in translation, or it does that with one generation. One uncle umkadenyo nafana magezgona, so the other person has partial information. So I think it's a good spot for Buganda to let's wind back up to the genesis of this knowledge and then find a way of
telling our stories, yeah. Because that's the point of culture, by the way. There is nothing else. There is nothing else about being a Muganda. A Muganda is a person like any other person. But then the stories that you hold to yourself, that, for us at home, so for example, for women, when we are greeting, we kneel. That is a Buganda. I think those are those small rituals are what make a Muganda. When someone dies, this is the process we go to bury the person. Those are the small things that make a Muganda. Otherwise, every time you're sitting down, you're just you're not a Muganda until you're making the Buganda rituals. You understand? That is the only time you're Muganda. But now, when those rituals start getting out of the zeitgeist, when the stories stop getting told, then the culture, the Bugandaness dies. It becomes a mythical thing.
That's true. Okay, interesting. Thank you so much for this episode, Kenneth.
You're welcome. Thank you very much for co-hosting with me.
You're welcome.